You know, I've been watching politics a long time. I was in the middle of it for decades. And I've learned that you can tell a lot about a leader not by how they handle their enemies, but by how they treat the people on their own team when those people do something inconvenient, something honest. And what happened this past week between President Trump and Jeanine Pirro, his own hand-picked United States attorney for the District of Columbia? Well, it's one of those moments that doesn't seem like much on the surface. A pool renovation, some peeling paint, a dropped criminal case. But if you're really paying attention, it tells you everything you need to know about where the incentives are pointing inside this administration. And I'll tell you why that should concern every American, regardless of party, before we're done here today. Now let me set the scene because the details matter. Earlier this year, President Trump made the renovation of the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool a personal project. He wanted it done before America's 250th birthday on July 4th. He wanted it painted American flag blue. That's a fine impulse, wanting our national landmarks to look their best for a milestone like that. I won't argue with the instinct. The reflecting pool is one of the most recognizable symbols of our democracy. It deserves care. But here's where it starts going sideways. The Interior Department awarded a no-bid contract to a Virginia company called Atlantic Industrial Coatings. Now, this was the firm's first federal contract. The original estimate was about $1.8 million. By June, the cost had ballooned to $14.7 million, nearly 8 times the original number. The company reportedly received a 20% profit margin, which is well above the 8 to 12% standard for federal construction work. And the timeline? They were rushing to finish before July 4th, cutting corners that any experienced project manager would have flagged. And sure enough, within weeks of the pool being refilled, the blue lining started peeling right off the bottom. Algae turned the water green, the very problem the renovation was supposed to solve. Now, instead of acknowledging that the project had been rushed and the contractor had botched the job, the administration pointed the finger at vandals. President Trump said, without providing evidence, that radical activists had slashed the lining with knives. On June 19th, a 67-year-old man named David Hearn, a former United States Olympic canoeist who competed in 3 summer games, stopped at the pool during a bike ride. He noticed a section of the lining had already come loose. He reached in and touched it. For that, he was detained by National Guard troops and U.S. Park Police for 5 hours. He was later indicted on a felony destruction of property charge, carrying up to 10 years in prison. Jeanine Pirro herself said prosecutors had tremendous evidence. And I want to stop here, because if you're someone who takes being informed seriously, and I believe the people watching this do, you need to understand that the details I'm walking through right now are the kind of details that mainstream coverage skims past in 90 seconds. That's why I keep telling folks to go check the Bluebill newsletter. 5 minutes a day, and it lays out the numbers, the timelines, the specifics that cable simply does not have time to dig into. I care about the people who watch this, and you deserve to have that full picture. Go check it. Now, here is where Jeanine Pirro did something remarkable, and I want to give credit where credit is due. On Friday, her office filed a 20-page motion to dismiss the charges against David Hearn. The filing stated, and these are the government's own words, that the damage was the result of flawed installation by the contractor and the rush to complete the project prior to events associated with the America 250 celebration. The filing went further. It said the Interior Department had failed to provide accurate information to prosecutors, and that it wasn't until after the indictment that documents surfaced showing the damage was caused by botched work, not vandalism. Pirro herself visited the drain pool on July 17th. She saw damage spread throughout the entire basin, including the center, where prosecutors acknowledged a vandal would not likely have attempted to peel the lining. Now look, whatever you think of Jeanine Pirro's politics, and she and I see the world very differently. She did what a prosecutor is supposed to do. When the evidence changed, she followed it. She put the facts ahead of the narrative. That is not easy when the person who gave you the job is the same person whose narrative you're contradicting. And how did President Trump respond? He posted on Truth Social, "I disagree 100% with Jeanine Pirro. I don't know what she was thinking. To me, it was a pure case of vandalism." Now, I want to be fair. A president is entitled to his opinion, and I'll grant that it must be frustrating to watch a project you championed publicly fall apart. But here's the honest truth. There is a difference between having an opinion and publicly undermining your own Justice Department's findings when those findings are backed by a 20-page evidentiary filing. The Interior Secretary, Doug Burgum, doubled down too, saying the damage was no different from defacing any one of our national monuments. Meanwhile, David Hearn's lawyers pointed out what had been obvious for weeks. The administration was using an innocent man as a scapegoat to cover for a failed renovation. And the reason this matters beyond the reflecting pool is because of what it signals. You're not going to find this on any cable network the way it needs to be explained. They don't have the time to dig into the real timeline, the contract numbers, the Interior Department's role in misleading prosecutors. The Blue Bill newsletter had this, with details most people didn't even know existed. The people reading it right now were not caught off guard by any of this. If you want to stay ahead of these stories, instead of reacting to them, that's where you go. Let me tell you something. When I was in the White House, I had prosecutors, inspectors general, cabinet members who told me things I didn't want to hear. That's part of the job. The question is never whether your people will disagree with you. The question is whether you've built a system where they feel safe doing it. Because when a president publicly attacks his own appointee for following the evidence, for doing exactly what a prosecutor is supposed to do, the message to every other appointee is clear. Loyalty to the narrative matters more than loyalty to the truth. And that has consequences that outlast any single presidency. Think about every U.S. attorney, every inspector general, every career official watching what happened to Pirro this week. The lesson they're absorbing is not complicated. It's, if you contradict the president, even with evidence, you will be publicly humiliated. That is a chilling precedent for the independence of federal law enforcement. And here's where this connects to something bigger. Because this pattern didn't start with Pirro, and it won't end with her. Look at what's happening right now between President Trump and Senate Majority Leader John Thune. For months, Trump has made the Save America Act, a bill requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote and photo ID at the polls, his top legislative priority. Voting experts have warned it could disenfranchise as many as 20 million Americans who don't have birth certificates or passports readily available. The bill has come to the Senate floor 5 separate times and failed every time because it needs 60 votes to clear the filibuster, and Democrats uniformly oppose it. So what does the president do? He demands that Thune cancel the August recess, a recess that Republican senators facing competitive midterm races in Maine, Alaska, and Ohio desperately need for campaigning, and keep everyone in Washington until the bill passes or the filibuster is eliminated. Thune, to his credit, pushed back. He said, "You could stay here till Christmas and the situation wouldn't change. Democrats aren't voting for this." And for saying that, for stating an obvious procedural reality, Trump attacked him publicly. Senator Mike Lee announced he would object to any adjournment. Rick Scott, Bill Hagerty, Tommy Tuberville fell in line. The pattern is identical to Pirro. Agree with the president completely or face public consequences. Now, we've got to think carefully about where all of this leads, because the consequences are not hypothetical. They're already unfolding. First, consider Pirro's position. She broke from Trump on a factual matter backed by evidence, and within hours, she was publicly repudiated by the President of the United States. How long does she remain in her role? And what does it mean for the next case where a prosecutor's evidence conflicts with a presidential narrative? Second, consider Thune. He's the Senate Majority Leader, trying to hold together a conference with members who need to campaign, members who refuse to change the filibuster, and a president demanding the impossible. If Thune caves and cancels recess, his vulnerable members lose critical campaign time heading into November. If he holds firm, the president escalates. There is no clean exit. And third, and this is what concerns me most, consider what this pattern teaches the American public about how government is supposed to work. If you do one thing after watching this, let it be this. Go read the Blue Bill newsletter. I recommend it more than anything else I could point you to right now. 5 minutes, and it will help you understand what all of this actually means for your family, for your vote, for the institutions that are supposed to protect you. Don't be the person who's always finding out last. Don't be the one sitting at the kitchen table just nodding along when everyone else already understands what happened. You deserve to have that. Here's what I know after a lifetime in public service. Democracy is not just a set of rules written on paper. It's a living practice. It depends on people inside the system, prosecutors, senators, inspectors, career officials, being willing to follow evidence even when it's inconvenient, to tell the truth even when the truth has a cost. Jeanine Pirro, whatever else I might say about her record, did that this week. John Thune, in his own way, is trying to do that right now. The question for all of us, Democrat, Republican, Independent, is whether we still value that, whether we still believe that the person who tells the truth deserves protection, not punishment. I believe we do. I believe most Americans, when they see the full picture, still want a government where facts matter more than loyalty, where evidence guides prosecution, where a 67-year-old Olympian on a bike ride doesn't face 10 years in prison because admitting a contractor botched the job would embarrass the wrong person. We have corrected course before in this country. We have rebuilt trust in our institutions after periods far darker than this one. But it requires us to pay attention. It requires us to demand better. And it requires us to remember that the strength of our democracy was never about any one leader. It was always about the millions of Americans who insist quietly, firmly, every single day that the truth still matters.